biologically broken. When the conversation we're having, which is a different conversation, it's a difficult conversation, it's a nuanced conversation, it's not simplistic, it's not one problem, one lever to solve it, it's a much deeper and more textured way of thinking. That is the conversation we have to have.
Psychological needs that are just as valuable and important as physical needs. Like, we know we have needs for nutrients, we know we have needs for water, we have needs psychological for all sorts of different things. Our communities are incredibly important. Love is incredibly important. Family is incredibly important. You know, I know some people that are older men that have been bachelors their whole lives, and they're childless, and now they're, you know, they don't have a deep connection with anybody, and they get to this very weird, strange place where they're like, is this it? Now I'm 70 years old and I've never really had children, and I don't know what to do, and this is my life now. And it's they've all their friends have had families now, and their families, a lot of times the kids are grown up, and it becomes very, very strange.
You know, I thought about that a lot. I interviewed this guy, Professor John Cassiopo at the University of Chicago, who's the leading expert in the world on loneliness. And he said this thing to me it's a bit like what the woman in Geneva said.
What a lonely way to live your life.
He's actually quite a cheerful person, actually. But he had this really interesting, this really simple point. But he just said, if you think about the circumstances where we evolved, right? If you got separated from the tribe, if you were alone,
right,
you were depressed and anxious for a really fucking good reason. You were about to be eaten, right?
Yes.
You were in terrible danger. If you got injured, no one would help you, you would die, right? So he showed that, so when, as you know, when we're stressed, we release a hormone called cortisol. He showed this really interesting experiment that I wrote about in the book. Being acutely lonely is as stressful as being punched in the face by a stranger when it comes to cortisol release, right? That's how deeply we are resistant to loneliness, right? It's a signal telling you to get back to the tribe. That's wyou evolved. It's a really important signal. If humans hadn't had that signal, we wouldn't be here, right? And I think you're right. So when you look at these men, if you have an isolated, there was this woman. So I covered this incredible protest movement that happened in Berlin on a big anonymous housing project, where no one knew each other, and they came together to protest. It was a woman who was about to kill herself because she was about to be evicted, and the whole housing project came together to say she should be allowed to stay in her home and they should have a rent freeze. And it's an amazing story, I tell it in the book, but there's something one of the women said to me that I never forgot. She's called Neriman. She'd grown up in Turkey and she'd come to Germany, I think, when she was 17. And she said, when I grew up in Turkey, what I called my home was my village and everyone in it. And then I came to live in the Western world, and I learned that what you're meant to call home is just your four walls, and if you're lucky, your family. And then this protest began, and we all got to know each other, and this whole place became my home. And I think of everywhere here as home now. And she realised that we are homeless in some sense in the Western world, that us humans have a need for a sense of belonging. And our sense of home is too small to meet our sense of home belonging. There's a wonderful Bosnian writer called Alexander Heyman who said, home is where people notice when you're not there, right? And a lot of us, like these guys you're talking about, these older guys, who notices if they're not there?
Right.
Probably no one.
Probably
they are,
no
in
one.
a sense, homeless, right? They are spiritually homeless. And I say that as I'm not a religious person, I don't mean that.
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. It's very important.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I think it's about, and this comes back to, think about how different that is, what everything we're talking about, think how different our conversation has been to what my doctor told me when I was a teenager. And I go in and I say, I'm in real pain and I feel like pain is leaking out of me and I can't control it. And he says, you've just got a malfunction in your brain, right? One of the worst things about that, there are many things wrong with that. Firstly, what he said to me is not true. I'm sure he believed it. I think he was misinformed. I don't think he was deliberately lying to me. But what he said was not true. But also, to me, the biggest problem with just telling this exclusively biological story about depression and anxiety, there's some real biological factors, of course, is it cuts us off from having this conversation, right? All those people you were talking about who are so insistent, as I was, that their depression is just the result of a chemical imbalance, if you think that, it disconnects you from the source of your pain. It tells you you're just biologically broken, and presumably always going to be biologically broken, when the conversation we're having, which is a different conversation, it's a difficult conversation, it's a nuanced conversation, it's not simplistic, it's not one problem, one lever to solve it, it's a much deeper and more textured way of thinking. That is the conversation we have to have. That's what the best scientists in the world are telling us, the World Health Organization. And my worry is we're just being pushed in, like you said, that very good metaphor about driving 37 miles in the wrong direction, right? We're just driving in the wrong direction. We're driving away from the source of our pain rather than towards it where it can be understood and solved. Of course, there's always going to be some pain in human life, but the fact that we have this 1 in 5 people taking a psychiatric drug, I think the figure is 1 in 10 13-year-old boys is taking a stimulant drug to make them focus. I think the figure is 30% of old people in retirement homes are being given antipsychotic drugs to shut them the fuck up because they're rebelling against the way they're being treated. In between, 1 in 4 middle-aged women in the United States is taking a chemical antidepressant at any given time.
1 in 4.
1 in 4. You're talking about a society that, the figures about how many children, it's much lower, but it's so much more extreme. The number of toddlers who've been given antipsychotics in the United States is just off the scale, right? I think Dr. Sami Tamimi has written about this. There's some extraordinary figure, I might be getting the figure slightly wrong, but it's something like a majority of children in foster care in the United States are being given stimulant drugs, basically to shut them up.
Yeah, that's a disturbing one. The Ritalin and the various stimulants that they give to children. What's that about? What's the cause of that?
Well, I think it's related. I've researched this much less than the other things we've talked about.
Okay.
But it came up a lot in the conversations that I had. There are many things going on here. One of them is not all of the causes of depression and anxiety that I wrote about, I couldn't help but notice reading all the research, interviewing the scientists, also can lead to decrease in focus and attention. So, for example, if you are deadened at work and you feel controlled all the time, you have to deaden yourself to get through it, it's harder. Attention's a muscle, right? It's harder to bring your brain back to focus. Like Joe wanted to just go and collapse and watch whatever shit was on The Bachelor or whatever. I don't think Joe would watch The Bachelor, actually. Whatever shit would have been on the telly, on the TV. So
even in his full state of depression, The Bachelor would have been too much.
That was a line too.
I can't do it.
He was prepared to take oxy, but not to go to that level of self-harm, right? Or think about loneliness, right? There's really, Professor Cacioppo has shown this. If you are lonely, that triggers what's called hypervigilance, right? Again, for a very good reason. If you're on your own in the savannas of Africa, right, you want to be hypervigilant.
Of course.
So you find it, one of the things that was most challenging to me is this evidence that the people with the lowest levels of attention problems and depression and anxiety in the United States are the Amish, right? And I am a atheist, gay, liberal. So the idea of going and learning something from the Amish was initially challenging to me. And I've got to admit, I felt really humbled by going and spending time there. I went to this village called Elkhart-LaGrange, which is just outside Fort Wayne in Indiana. And, there's still a lot I disagree with about the Amish, don't get me wrong, not least because I just rewatched Witness. But I could see that they've got. So there's a very interesting thing about the Amish, as you know, when you turn 16, if you're an Amish, you've got to leave and go and live in what they call the English world, our world, right? Mm-hmm. And then you decide whether to come back. About 80% decide to come back, 20% don't. It's one of the reasons why the Amish is never counted as a cult, because no cult would do that, right? No cult's going to tell you to leave for 2 years and then decide whether to come back. It's in fact the exact opposite. So they have lived in our world. They know our world really well. And I remember having this very challenging conversation with, what's his name? Lauren Beachy, his name is an Amish guy there, who said, there was so revered, it comes back to the weight conversation we had. He said, look, there's loads of things I miss. He talked about missing that 70s show. He said, I used to love driving in trucks because they obviously don't drive, they don't use electricity off the grid. And he said, but if I kept those things, I wouldn't spend time with my family. I wouldn't spend time with my children. I wouldn't know who my neighbours were. And he said this very challenging thing. He said, Weight Watchers? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, the idea of Weight Watchers is you can only lose weight together as a group, right? It helps, or not only, but it helps you to lose weight together as a group, that you would find it harder on your own. This is like that. And I said, what? So are you saying like the Amish is like Weight Watchers for the problems of Western civilization? And he's like, yeah, that's what I'm saying. And to me, that was so challenging, the idea that you've got to give, because it comes back to what we say about junk values. In our culture, we're told the solution is always to get more. And the idea that the solution is to have less and be present more is really challenging, right?
Well, I don't even think it's about having less. It's about what they're doing is, look, think about what the Amish are doing. First of all, massive sense of community, right? They're very connected. They're not using cell phones. They're not using email. So the community is also based on one-to-one interaction, real social cues, real social interaction, which is critical. It's a big part of being a human being, and it's one of the more absent things in modern society. 2, physical labor. They're involved in a lot of physical labor because they don't use electricity. They don't use power tools. There's so many things that they don't do. So because of their culture, they're making their own homes, all right? So they have a vested interest in helping each other, working together as a community, and they have a deep sense of satisfaction of constructing each other's homes. You construct my home with me. I help you build your home. They take care of their animals. They take care of their crops. There's a real connection with where they get their food from, a real connection with where they live, their community, the sense of just the sense of belonging to something that's bigger than you. There's so many factors involved in their happiness that you can kind of see where, yeah, there's a lot of wacky shit with the cult aspects of being an Amish person, but what you get out of it, it's almost like if you had a self-help group that subscribed to all the positive benefits of being Amish, and they just called it like regrounding or something like that. You just go out there and you become a part of nature, and I mean that seems like a co-op. It seems like some sort of a farm-based co-op, right?
Yeah,
build each other's houses, stay together. You don't have to wear sexy clothes. Let's just all wear the same shit.
Hello guys, this is another input of myself in the video. I hope you have a good and a productive day. And today's advice is linked to the video, of course, and it's about social interactions, loneliness, friends, work, all that stuff. So basically you can take this advice in all these parts and apply it everywhere. It's kind of the same for everything. And like it was said in this video, nowadays people just go through some big wave of depression, anxiety, loneliness. And I don't want to be sexist on this one, but this goes more for the men's side. Like on the female side, and this sounds a bit sexist, but this is the sad truth about the word, they don't really need to do much think about it. Like if they have a nice body or a nice voice or overall a nice appearance, and they make themselves like approachable and friendly and open, they would get 10 times the attention that a man would get if he were doing the same thing, because they don't get so much attention so easier. They need to improve, work on themselves, make an image of themselves so they can get some attention from others. And I want to make a highlight on this recent mentality, like the lonely wolf, that you should do it all by yourself and you don't need others, just work all day and stuff like this. People who say like they are on monk mode and they don't let any distraction go in their ways and stuff like this. And that works for about 2 months, maybe, like 2 to 3 months, that works. But in the end you feel just anxious, depressed, you just not have friends, and I don't know, maybe your work will improve, but I doubt that, because as you know, you can't really work more than 4 hours a day, like deep work sessions. Some individuals work for like 6 hours a day, I don't know, some deep work, but they are a special kind. Let's say the average guy can deep work for like 1 to maybe 2 hours a day, and the rest of the work is just not as good as that 2 hours window of deep work. And I'm telling you, like, it's important to have social interactions. Like, okay, you have your deep work sessions, you work for like maybe 3 to 4 hours a day, but then just take some time to recharge your batteries. Like, go out, like have a walk, or call a friend, let's hang out, let's discuss some things, let's do something. So basically you kind of need some way of social interaction with people, because if you're not going to do that, what are you going to do? Like staring at the wall all day, just cravings for some new ideas and stuff like that. that sounds good, but it doesn't actually work, you know. And I believe this is the problem with loneliness, because most people lack the skills of social interactions. Like, they lack the skill of approaching, bonding with people, just making friends, like talking with people, like having some interest. And I said it numbers of times, just read the book How to Make Friends and Influence People. It's a great book about communication and how you can find and maintain relationships. And you know, these things are not teaching the schools nowadays, because in schools you have the easy way. Like, you go in class and you make some friends there, you know, school friends, and you're kind of forced on doing that communication and making friends, because you don't have anything else to do there. Like, you have the communication part and the learning part, and that's it. Basically, if you're not talking with somebody, let's say you just learn, and on your breaks you need to do something. I remember in my first years of school, the teachers always say, like, get out of class, go out, like make groups and socialize and talk with each other and stuff like that. You're basically forced to do that. But when you get out of school and you don't have to go to school anymore, and you're just on your own, and you don't have your school friends anymore, you don't know how to do that. You don't know how to go out and make friends or socialize or something like this, because you are not forced anymore to do that. You're on your own, and you don't have the basic skills of approaching and listening to people and stuff like that. So I believe that in the lonely part, the fix of the problem is just learn social skills and interact with people and get out of that lonely wolf mentality, because in the long run is never going to be the winner case. Yeah, that's the advice for today. I hope you have a good and a productive day, and until I catch you in the next one, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, because it helps me a lot, and watch this video over here because this is a powerful one. Peace.